Right, so here we are with part 2 of part 2, or is it just part 1 of part 3? I make no secret of the fact that I've just made this up as I go along, using whatever bits I've got. Okay, so let's start with, we'll just do a bit of a recap, rehash. See this thing here? Okay, this is a dongle. That's what's out at the property, if you'll remember. Okay, it's just a 4G dongle, right? Plugs in the USB, has its own power, and I just plug it in to a power source, not to a computer, and this thing becomes basically, you know, a portable router, a hotspot, 4G access thingy. But of course, I program it or option it for 3G at this point in time because 3G seems to be more stable than 4G. Okay, it's like the most bottom tier, bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the bottom rung of the ladder type dongle, prepaid dongle. One, doesn't have a static IP address. Two, it doesn't actually have any wide area network addressable IP address. It doesn't even have a local IP address unless you upgrade it to some kind of fancy pants business account, or who knows, I don't care. All I was interested in was overcoming the limitations of that dongle. So the entire premise of this exercise is that whichever CAT program you choose, whether it be Ham Radio Deluxe, whether it be TRX Manager, you can load all of them on your computer, so long as you're familiar with those at a local level. Say for example, if you use Ham Radio Deluxe and have used it locally to plug into your radio, whether it be a 991 or a TS2000 or whatever, then you've solved half the problem. And Ham Radio Deluxe and TRX Manager, they come with inbuilt servers, okay? But we're not using those because I also run surveillance as well. So there are different layers of software on the computer out there which I need to look at and control. And the only way you can do it is remote desktop protocol. Getting up to this point, you've probably been using a CAT program and have become comfortable with it and comfortable configuring it. And so you'll be halfway there as to then using it as a remote operation. So you'll sort of say, okay, well, which computer and which radio can I allocate as my remote radio station? Once that's done, you can then move it out to your location. Okay, and then if there's any tweaks necessary, you can do that through the remote desktop protocol. But you know, always good to set these things up locally and make sure that they switch on, switch off, and don't freeze. You know, possibly down to the voice pipeline, but we'll get to that in a minute. And then you'll make the step to, oh, I think I might try and remotely operate this. So I have actually got 2 remote desktop protocol programs up my sleeve. The first one is called AnyDesk. Okay, AnyDesk, that's one. It's always good to have a backup though, and a good backup at this point, I mean, you can use, if you're familiar with remote desktop protocols, you know, programs such as TeamViewer, for example, or LogMeIn. I mean, yeah, you can use them, whatever you're comfortable with. But I've gone off TeamViewer and I've gone to AnyDesk, which is free. The other free program of note is actually Google Chrome. Has an extension called Chrome Remote Desktop, would you believe it? And it's pretty darn good. Okay, so there's some computers there of mine, including the one up there. But why don't we just connect to the one out at Eagle Rock via Google Chrome's own extension. Da-da, there it is, there's the desktop, and I've just set it up. Oh, there you go, there's a picture and everything. So it's good to have a backup. Maybe one day you'll come across, you'll go to launch TeamViewer or AnyDesk and it doesn't work. Usually that means that there's some fault which has taken out your entire computer offline, and maybe Google Chrome won't get into it either. But there have been occasions while I've been doing this whereby
your primary remote desktop protocol will fail, Google Chrome will get in there and you'll be able to reboot the machine then, and then everything should, you might have cleared the problem. So take on board 2 remote desktop protocols and one to back up the other. With Google Chrome, you'll need to have a Gmail account, just the one. And with AnyDesk, you create an account with them, and you only need the one account. The other thing you'll need is 2 Skype accounts. You'll need one Skype account for the remote and one for you to use to log in with.
By the way, it looks like I'm running like 4 computers here, but there's actually 2, and each laptop, I've just got 2 laptops, and each laptop has another monitor attached to it. I don't actually really need 2. I could probably use 1. However, the reason I use 2 computers is because this, as I've said before, this aging old laptop here, it just so happens that my Heil BM10 headset, which I originally bought for the ICOM, the IC7100, in its raw connector form, actually fits the older type connectors of this computer and works. Okay, ordinarily I would unplug that extension speaker, and right, there you go. Without any modification to it, it works on that computer beautifully, straight up and down, no worries whatsoever. So this is a much newer computer, this one. This is probably barely a year old, where this one, I don't know how old that one is, it's probably about, might even be over 10 years old, that one. This one, less than a year old, and pain in the butt, I have to say. It has, at the moment I've just got extension speakers plugged into it, but there's only the one connector for both microphone and speakers on this computer. And I even bought one of these, which splits from, that's supposed to go into the new computer, the single socket in the new computer. You can see it's got a 2 rings, tip and a sleeve. And then it's got these 2 little inputs where it splits, one for the microphone and one for the headset. Doesn't work. Who knows what the problem is, whether it's that bodgy cable or this bodgy computer, but hooking up a headset to it seems to be problematic. Therefore, headset gets plugged directly into this 10-year-old computer and works gorgeously. The only thing that is a bit of a problem with this computer, as mentioned before, is that the Windows on it is causing me problems. So I've loaded a popular version of Linux on this computer, and I use the web version of Skype. Over here, right, all I use this for is the remote desktop protocol part of the operation. This one here is for the audio pipeline. This one here is for remote desktop protocol. I could, I could use this one all by itself to run all the components of the remote radio station. However, this thing here is holding me back from getting audio in and out. So I'm left with this one, which I'm not at all unhappy with. Not at all unhappy with. I think if you can split those 2 components up, I reckon it's probably a good idea. Why Skype? Why Skype? This will be debated eternally, no doubt. So there's 2 main faults. There's two main faults with Skype. Actually, let's not call them faults. There's 2 problems with Skype, but there is one very good thing about Skype which brings it over the line against anything else. The first thing with Skype,
The first problem with Skype is that it mingles in with the signal its own noise reduction system, which you have no control over. So the second thing is that it uses a semi-duplex or quasi-duplex system, whereby there doesn't seem to be individual streams of incoming and outgoing audio. And you can test this for yourself when you, say for example, are listening and then you blow into the microphone or sneeze or do something, and it mutes the incoming audio. I tried a couple of different pieces of software. IP Sound is one that was apparently developed specifically for the amateur radio operator in mind, but I wasn't able to get it working properly. I tried TeamSpeak. That means I have to run my own server. The same for another program called Mumble. The audio quality of those two programs are excellent. They don't, you can turn off the processing, right, the noise reduction mechanism in them, and they both seem to carry two separate streams of audio which don't interfere with each other. What else did I try? Also, the audio systems within the remote desktop protocol. Okay, you can get audio through Google Chrome and through AnyDesk. However, they are mangled. The audio comes back completely and utterly mangled. Going back to TeamSpeak and Mumble and maybe any other system, the big problem with those that I have found with every single one of them is that they have a build-up of latency over a period of time. Could be about 15 minutes, could be 10 minutes, could be half an hour. People will start saying to you, mate, you're chopping your last few words off when you're pretty damn positive that you're dekeying with good, with a good gap between your last words and when you stop transmission. Anyway, people will start complaining. You'll know that this latency build-up is occurring when they start saying, mate, you're not getting the last words of your previous over. And then you'll do a test. You'll do that mode switch test, and you'll realise that you'll hit the mode button, and then there's a 5-second delay. And then you'll hit another mode button or do something else with the radio, and you'll realise that the audio that has become delayed by about 5 to 10 or even more seconds. This does not occur with Skype. It does not occur with Skype for some reason. So, and it is the only program I have found where that build-up of latency does not occur or is corrected, auto-corrects itself. It just doesn't happen. And so therefore Skype is the only usable program for this particular operation. Other people have been able to get other programs working great. That's awesome. But in this particular situation, Skype is the only program that does not have a build-up of latency. And I've learned to live with it, and I'm happy with it. My conveyed audio and the recovered audio from the remote station are good enough. And from there, you just got to move on.
Okay, so I've just switched off the IC7100 at the remote shed. Let's backtrace. Basically, I'll try and do this as quickly and as efficiently as possible, because I know I have this really bad tendency to waffle. So at the other end, at the shed up at Eagle Rock, we have an IC7100. And controlling that IC7100 is TRX Manager. I'll just minimize that down. What we're looking at here is the desktop to the computer, which is hosting that version of TRX Manager, which I just had up. But the radio is connected to this computer at the remote location with a USB cable. The speakers
USB audio codec. Okay, and that's the codec that you install from ICOM. It's a little bit warped how you have to think of these things. The speaker properties at that end is actually my microphone. That is the transmitted audio coming from me, right, is being conveyed to the radio via the computer's speaker output. And I've set that for 75. Pretty much you'll find that I've set things to 75 across the board. The microphone circuit in the computer is the recovered audio from the 7100 coming back to me. The microphone at the other end, right, is also set for 75, okay? And that's the audio coming back from the radio when it's dekeyed and it's in receive mode, and it wants to send me the recovered audio, that is the other stations that I want to listen to, back to me. Once you've set that up, the method for getting the audio to and from the remote location, okay, is done with Skype. Okay, now what I'm about to open up is the settings for the Skype application, right? And you can currently see it there sitting in a session with my client back here. Okay, so I have dialed in from this computer into this computer over here, but what you're actually looking at here is a virtual representation of a computer which is sitting 250 kilometers away. This is the Skype application that is open on that computer 250 kilometers away. Okay, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to open up the settings for it. Okay, and in particular the audio and video settings for it. Okay, so you're not going to see any image there from the camera because it's nighttime, and also that particular camera is being used by the surveillance program, so it won't have access to it anyway. Now, but of most interest to us is the audio. Here we go. It again is selected as the USB audio codec. Automatically adjust microphone settings? No, I've got that switched off, and I have it set, basically hard-coded in the Windows sound control panel. Okay, remember I said, yep, the level is hard set, it's 75. Okay, hard set at 75. We don't automatically adjust the microphone settings, I take control. The speakers, you also take control of that as well. But it's set as the USB audio codec, right? And playback, as I've already showed you, is I've already set the levels. I've hard set the levels again at 75. Okay, so the good thing about Skype is that you can individually set the pipelines that audio goes in and out to Skype. Everything else on the computer can be set to whatever you like because Skype allows you to choose specifically what it uses as speakers and microphones. However, with any desk, right, with any desk, we deliberately disable the transmission and output of the audio. Now, I hope this isn't too hard a thing to grasp. Okay, I deliberately disable transmission and output, right, incoming and outgoing audio via the remote desktop protocol. Why do I do that? Because Skype operates independently. I have specifically selected that Skype and Skype alone should be the audio carrier between that computer and this one here back at home. Okay, so that means that the remote desktop protocol can have a bit of bandwidth reduced on it by switching off the audio. You don't need it. All you need to handle the audio is Skype. The difference between AnyDesk and Google Chrome is that Google Chrome, you cannot switch off the audio. So therefore you may have a slight increase in bandwidth usage, and the remote desktop protocols don't handle audio very well by themselves. It tends to get mangled and mashed, and it just doesn't seem to work as well and as smoothly as how Skype tends to handle it. One thing you might want to put on your remote computers, right, is another little application called Rain Meter. Okay, Rain Meter. Where is it? It's represented by this little raindrop here, Rain Meter. Okay, so Rain Meter allows you to set up some fully floating resource indicators, so you can check your remote. Keep an eye on your remote machine's usage of CPU, the RAM, right, the disk usage, and importantly, you can make comparisons if you're fiddling around with different remote desktop applications and audio settings. You can check the bandwidth, and that's about it. So now I'm going to shut down again the I'm just going to close TRX Manager, okay, and I'm going to now drop the Skype call, but from this end, okay. And just one thing to remember is that I'm using the web interface for Skype here at home, but at the remote end, and that's primarily because I'm forced to, because I'm using Linux, and it's easier to get this interface up and running on Linux through the Chromium web browser as it is to actually install a Linux-based Skype application. But on the Windows 10 end, this is running Windows 10, we run the Skype application primarily because of the control you have over the audio and the fact that you can set it up to auto answer. You're just dialing with this one and this one auto answers. You don't have to go back to this one and tell it to answer the call coming inbound from that one. Okay, so we'll just close that down, and look, I think we're pretty much done. I hope that's all fairly, I mean, it took a long time to get through it all, but that's basically the setup we have at the moment. And if you want to have a crack at this, try anything you like, but that's the basis of how I operate here. 73s.